John and Blessing had been more than just friends, they were childhood companions who had grown up side by side. From running around the playground as kids to navigating the challenges of adulthood, their bond was special. To John, Blessing was everything. He admired her beauty, kindness, and strength. Over the years, his affection for her grew into something deeper, a love he could not deny. John showered Blessing with gifts, from simple trinkets that reminded him of her to more thoughtful surprises that reflected how well he knew her. Every gesture was filled with meaning, each one a quiet declaration of his love. But Blessing, though appreciative, never saw these as romantic. She cherished their friendship, leaning on John during her worst heartbreaks, yet never realizing he was the one person who loved her most. She had been wounded by love too many times, and after her last relationship ended badly, Blessing shut herself off from romance, focusing only on herself. John witnessed Blessing's heartbreak up close, and every tear she shed over the wrong men felt like a knife in his own heart. He hated seeing her suffer, but what hurt more was that she never considered him as more than a friend. As her confidant, he offered comfort, giving her the space she needed to heal. But inside, John struggled with his own emotions. He yearned to tell her how much he loved her, how different things could be if she only gave him a chance. Yet, fear kept him silent. What if she rejected him? Worse still, what if he ruined the only relationship they had, one built on years of friendship? The thought of losing her altogether was too painful to bear. And so, he kept his love hidden, pretending he was okay with being just her friend, even though it was slowly tearing him apart. One evening, after weeks of sleepless nights and endless rehearsals in front of the mirror, John decided he couldn't hold it in any longer. He asked Blessing to meet him at their childhood spot, a quiet park they often visited. It was a place full of memories for them, where they had shared countless conversations about their dreams and fears. As they sat on the familiar park bench, John could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The cool evening air did little to calm his nerves. This was it, the moment that would change everything. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. "Blessing," he started, his voice betraying his anxiety, "I have something important to tell you." She looked at him with concern, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What's wrong, John?" she asked, her voice gentle. His heart raced faster. He knew there was no turning back now. Summoning every ounce of courage, John spoke the words that had been weighing on his heart for years. "Blessing, I've been in love with you for as long as I can remember. I've tried to show you, in every way I know how, but I can't keep hiding it. You're everything to me, and I don't want to go on pretending I'm okay with just being friends." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, the vulnerability of the moment overwhelming him. He watched as Blessing's expression shifted from confusion to shock, her eyes wide as she processed what he had just said. John felt exposed, as if he had laid his heart bare for her to either accept or reject. The silence that followed was excruciating. Every second felt like an eternity as he waited for her response, his palms sweaty, his heart aching with uncertainty. After what felt like an endless pause, Blessing finally spoke, her voice soft and unsure. "John, I didn't know you felt this way. I'm so sorry, but I just don't see you like that. You've always been like a brother to me. I care about you, but not in the way you want." Her words, though gentle, hit John like a cold gust of wind. His worst fears had come true. Blessing's rejection wasn't harsh, but it was final. She stood up, clearly uncomfortable, as the weight of their conversation settled in. John's heart sank, feeling as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. He had taken the biggest risk of his life, and now, everything was unraveling before his eyes. Blessing apologized, her face showing signs of discomfort and guilt, before walking away, leaving John alone on the bench with his shattered heart. John sat there for a long time after Blessing left, his mind racing with emotions. He had feared this outcome, but hearing it directly from her crushed him in ways he wasn't prepared for. The once comforting park now felt cold and empty, as if the warmth of their memories had vanished along with her. From that day forward, things between John and Blessing changed drastically. She began to distance herself from him, finding excuses to avoid their usual hangouts and rarely returning his calls. It became clear to John that their friendship was crumbling, despite his efforts to salvage it. Each attempt to reach out was met with silence, and eventually, John accepted that perhaps it was best to let her be. The pain of losing her, both as a friend and as the woman he loved, was unbearable, but he knew he couldn't force her to stay in his life. As the weeks went by, John found it harder to cope. Everywhere he went, there were reminders of Blessing, their favorite coffee shop, the park, even the quiet streets they used to walk together. He couldn't escape the memories, and each one brought fresh waves of heartache. It was then that he decided he needed a change, something drastic to help him move on. An opportunity to work in Canada had come up months ago, and though he had been hesitant at first, it now seemed like the perfect escape. Leaving Lagos would mean leaving the pain behind. He could start fresh, somewhere far away from the memories of Blessing. And so, with a heavy heart, John made the decision to leave. It wasn't easy, but staying felt impossible. The day of his departure arrived, and John packed up his belongings with a sense of finality. He knew this was his only chance to heal, even if it meant leaving everything he knew behind. As he made his way to the airport, he stopped at a bar and had a few drinks, hoping they would numb the pain, even if just for a little while. His mind was clouded with thoughts of Blessing, of what could have been, of the life he had imagined with her that would never come to be. Sitting in the back of the cab, watching the familiar streets pass by for what could be the last time, John felt a mixture of sadness and relief. This was his fresh start, though it didn't feel quite as liberating as he had hoped. At the same time, Blessing was pacing her living room, her heart heavy with regret. She had thought that pushing John away was the right thing to do, that keeping their friendship intact was more important than anything else. But now, she realized that her decision had cost her something far more valuable. The emptiness she felt without John in her life was unbearable. She had thought she could handle it, but as the days went on, she realized that John had always been the one constant in her life, the one person who truly loved her. The love she had been searching for all along had been right in front of her, and she had been too blind to see it. Driven by the sudden clarity, Blessing rushed to John's house, hoping to talk to him, to apologize for pushing him away. But when she arrived, the house was empty. Panic set in as she knocked on the door, only to be told by his neighbor that John had packed his things and left earlier that day, headed to the airport for a flight to Canada. Blessing's heart raced. She couldn't let him leave, not like this. She grabbed her phone and called his best friend, Albert, desperately hoping for answers. When Albert confirmed that John was leaving the country, Blessing felt a surge of urgency. She had to stop him. She had to tell him the truth, that she loved him, that she had been wrong to push him away. Without wasting another second, Blessing rushed to the airport, her heart pounding in her chest. She could barely think straight as she navigated through the traffic, her mind solely focused on one thing, getting to John before it was too late. The drive felt like an eternity, and with each passing moment, her fear of losing him grew. By the time she reached the airport, she was breathless and frantic. She ran through the terminal, scanning the crowd for any sign of John. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw him near the boarding gate, suitcase in hand, looking lost in thought. Without hesitation, she called out his name, her voice trembling with desperation. "John!" John turned, startled to see Blessing standing there, her eyes wide with emotion. "Blessing, what are you doing here?" he asked, confused by her sudden appearance. But before he could say another word, Blessing dropped to her knees, right in the middle of the bustling airport. The world around them seemed to freeze as onlookers stopped to watch the scene unfolding before them. Blessing's voice quivered as she spoke. "John, I've been so blind. I've spent so long looking for love in all the wrong places, and all this time, it was right here with you. I pushed you away because I was scared of getting hurt again. But I realize now that I can't lose you. I love you, John. I've always loved you." Her words hung in the air, raw and filled with emotion. John stood there, stunned, as Blessing poured out her heart to him in front of everyone. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had spent years dreaming of this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure if he could believe it. "Blessing," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion, "why now? Why did it take you so long to see me?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him, her heart aching with the weight of her mistakes. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm here now. And I know it's a lot to ask, but please, don't go. Give us a chance." The airport was silent, except for the distant sound of announcements over the loudspeaker. John's heart wavered as he looked at the woman he had loved for so long, now begging for him to stay. Slowly, John reached out his hand and helped Blessing to her feet. His eyes softened as he looked at her, the pain of the past weeks still fresh, but the love he had for her overpowering everything else. "I've waited so long for you, Blessing," he said softly, "but I need to know that you're sure. I can't go through this again." Blessing nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sure, John. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." John looked at her for a long moment, his emotions swirling inside him. Then, finally, he smiled, a small, tentative smile that spoke of hope and healing. "Okay," he said quietly, pulling her into his arms. "I won't go." As they embraced, the crowd around them erupted into applause, but all that mattered in that moment was them, the two people who had finally found their way to each other.